morning, everyone, and welcome to NIT's presentation on testing Gen Z's bullshit meter when it comes to your marketing campaigns. My name is Anish Dewan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of NIT. I'm also Gen Zer myself, and if you can't tell by the accent, I'm from America. Our team is joining you today from the United States, and we're really excited to be here and talk about a topic that we are very passionate about, which is using Gen Z's feedback to not only build your marketing campaigns, but to guide them as well. So I'm assuming most of us are here today at YMS at the conference this week to learn a little bit more about how we can connect and how we can engage and how we can understand this next generation. And that's why we love conferences like YMS. It's a great way to meet awesome brands, awesome marketers, thought leaders in this space to understand how to engage this next generation. And the bad news here is that a lot of brands really need to talk about this because Gen Z does not believe that a lot of brands do a really good job of engaging and marketing to them. About 73% of our generation believes that brands can do a better job of marketing to us. And primarily what they're saying is that about 69% of us are saying that brands are just trying too hard. And about 65% of or 60% of us are saying that, brands just don't understand our sense of humor. What's even worse is that about 65% of us have actually cringed at an ad that was targeted at our generation or to us. So using our platform, we went out and we actually talked to Gen Z. We got voice of consumer videos, 30 to 90 second long kind of selfie video feedbacks. And we asked Gen Z, how can brands do a better job of marketing to our generation? And here's what we heard.
I feel that a lot of brands don't really know how to market to my generation because they automatically assume that we're just into loud things or just want memes and stuff like that, when in actuality, we just want a couple things. We want comedy and we want relatability.
Most video advertisements that are directed towards my generation are inaccurate in what they think our sense of humor is and end up being very cringy.
Something I find kind of cringy is when brands try to specifically market to a younger generation and use like slang terms that they think that a younger generation typically uses. Just because they saw a small focus group of people use that type of language does not mean it's that language used as a whole.
A lot of times these brands try to make jokes that are on trend, or they'll try to use social media in a way that's not genuine, so it doesn't actually, it sticks out in our feed instead of like seamlessly flowing into it. I think a lot of times they try to exaggerate our behavior to try to relate to us, and I just think it comes off as almost mocking instead of like a genuine market towards us.
This is because I think they try too hard to use our lingo and say stuff the way that we say stuff and do stuff the way that we do stuff.
A video that made me cringe so bad, like an ad, was with, I don't know who it was with, but it made me cringe because they try to like be funny and they weren't like really funny to me. It was just corny and yeah.
Whenever I think about ads that make me cringe, it's influencers that get paid to review these products as if they are like a genuine thing that they've trying or something that like it always comes off very staged whenever they put on a lipstick that looks exactly the same, and they're exaggerating everything and they're saying how wonderful it is, it fixed all my problems, it's you have to get this. It doesn't really ever seem genuine. It doesn't ever seem like they're actually liking the product.
It irritates me when they're either overplayed or they try super hard to be inclusive of everyone.
Probably because it was like a rave, like an LGBTQ rave, and as a member of the community it was just like cringy with all the rainbow and like tried a little bit too hard to be super inclusive.
I honestly feel like most brands cannot market to my generation because, I have bills to pay, I have stuff to do, and trying to market with a quirky song doesn't do anything for me.
So a lot of great feedback there. Gen Z can be pretty ruthless in their feedback. So we didn't want to throw any brands under the bus, which is why we bleeped out some of that. But why should you care about this? Well, we're all here today, so I think we all know just how important Gen Z is. But let's put some numbers to it. Today, they account for about 40% of the global population. In the US alone, they have over $600 billion in spending power. Obviously, that's a lot greater when you look at it across the globe. And brands, like all of us in this room today, are going to be spending over $130 billion on Gen Z marketing in the next year. But one thing that we don't talk about a lot, and what we're going to be talking about today, is how to not get canceled by Gen Z as well. So it's not enough to just create marketing that is effective and engaging them, but also creating marketing that doesn't get you canceled by this next generation. So when I saw this stat from our research, I was really shocked. 1 in 3 Gen Zers have canceled a brand because of their marketing or because of their ads. That's almost 1 in 3 Gen Zers that have completely shut themselves off to a brand because of how they marketed themselves to this next generation. So what does Gen Z want from brands when it comes to their marketing? It's actually pretty simple. We just want a seat at the table. 67% of us are more likely to purchase from brands that ask for Gen Z's feedback in their marketing campaigns. So we went out again and talked to a couple Gen Zers and asked them how can brands best use their feedback in their marketing? And this is what we heard.
I do feel like brands should include my generation more, just because I feel like it would be better and beneficial for the brand, because then the generation will actually buy products from the brand. But in order to do that, you're going to have to get our input.
I think brands should consider my generation's feedback when it comes to marketing, because I definitely do think over the years there has been kind of a disconnect in between the way brands used to market and how my generation expects people to market to them.
I definitely think brands should involve my current generation, because obviously we're the up-and-coming adult generation, and we're like the new generation, so it'd make more sense.
I think brands should definitely take into consideration my generation's feedback, because if not, they'll just have old heads that are trying too hard to relate to what my generation's looking for. For instance, that meme, "How do you do, fellow kids?"
So how many of you guys have seen this meme before today? Just a quick show of hands. Awesome, great. So how do brands not be this guy? How do you actually take Gen Z's feedback into account when you're launching your marketing campaigns? Well, it first starts off by getting feedback from Gen Z, which today is actually really, really difficult. So there's really only a couple options out there today that most people have access to. One is talking to friends and family, right? Talking to your nieces and nephews, maybe your children, maybe if you have a recent grad working at your company, and getting their input on your marketing campaigns. The second is going with your gut, or the gut of the loudest voice in the room, the person that feels most confident in what you're creating. And the other one is not getting feedback at all, just putting something out there and hoping it sticks with Gen Z and doesn't fall flat. Well, before starting KNIT, we went out and we talked to Gen Z's favorite brands, and we asked them, how are you guys running your marketing campaigns? And what we found is that the best brands in the world are doing things completely differently. Instead of just talking to friends and family, they've invested the resources in being able to gather feedback from a diverse group of Gen Zers. Gen Z is the most diverse generation alive today, so they wanted to make sure that the feedback they were getting represented that. They made decisions based on data, looking at what Gen Z was saying and why they were saying something to drive their decisions. And they were doing things in an agile manner. They were trying it before they bought it. And what that means is they were testing their marketing campaigns with Gen Z, gathering feedback on it, and then using that feedback to continue improving it till they felt good about what they were putting out in the world. Now, this is incredibly difficult to do. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of resources, and it takes a lot of effort. But that's why we created KNIT. we built a platform where we have 1 million Gen Zers in our community for brands to tap into and gather feedback from, both through quantitative methods like traditional surveys, but also qualitative methods like those voice of consumer videos you've seen. And it allows brands to do all three of these things: tap into a very diverse network of Gen Zers to gather feedback from, make data-backed decisions, both on the hard data coming from the quantitative data, the what, but also the why, the consumer behaviors and attitudes that you can hear through those videos, and also do it in an agile manner because they can get feedback in just a couple minutes or a couple hours to help them learn and drive their marketing campaigns. And we've done this with some of the world's best and biggest brands. So we started off in the US, but really excited to announce here today that we've just launched in Europe. We're working with our global brands to gather feedback from Gen Zers now in Europe, but also now working with European brands to gather Gen Z feedback from folks in their home countries. So just want to walk through a couple different case studies of how brands have done this really successfully on our platform. And then we'll wrap things up with a few different kind of takeaways from the work that we've done with these brands, as well as the 50+ other brands that we work with. So the first case study here is with a large global consumer electronics brand. They were using our platform to validate different ad concepts, and in the process avoided a major fail, or a major potential fail. So they used our platform to gather feedback from over 200 Gen Zers in just 72 hours. And what they were testing were a variety of different ad concepts. They were not only able to identify which concepts worked best. As you can see, concept A here performed the best. Over 77% of Gen Zers found it to be favorable. But they were also able to identify concepts that fell flat with Gen Z. And what's really interesting here is that the brand actually thought concept I, the worst performing concept, would perform best. And the reason for that is they were taking inspiration from a really famous show called Euphoria. It's very popular with Gen Z to develop this concept. So they internally thought that this was going to be the winning concept. What ended up happening is when they got feedback from Gen Z, they found that it was completely inauthentic to their brand. It was giving off the completely opposite vibe of what they were hoping to have in their marketing campaign. So let's hear a little bit more from Gen Z on why they didn't love that concept and what we can learn from that.
So this one I didn't love. Gives me kind of like 13 Reasons Why vibes. And I don't know, just the discoloration and such like blue tones gives me like very depressing vibes.
Secondly, I think the image is just very off-putting. It's just what appears to be a white passing man in a bathroom. It gives very passed out at a frat party vibes. It is very off-putting.
So as you can see, this was a total miss in terms of what they were hoping to get across with the concept, and allowed them to gather feedback to prevent what would have been a major fail, but also optimize their ad concepts to focus on what was performing really well with this Gen Z audience. The second case study is a work we were doing with a major retailer to help them launch a Pride campaign. And to this retailer's credit, they wanted to very much be, make sure that what they were building was appropriate and respectful of this community, of the LGBTQ community, or Gen Z LGBTQ community within the United States in this case. So they used our platform to gather responses from over 300 Gen Zers over the course of just 6 days. And they discovered some really interesting things. The first thing is they were able to identify product categories that the community felt were underrepresented when it came to Pride merchandise. They were then able to double down within these categories to identify individual items that performed really well versus items that weren't performing that well. And similar to the case study before, they were able to use that qualitative data to identify why things were performing well and why other things were not performing well. So let's take a look at some of the videos that came out of this case study and some of the insights the brand was able to pull.
A lot of people really like the outwardly Pride rainbow. I have some of that stuff too, but I feel like some of that stuff is also a dime a dozen, so I kind of like more of the subtle nods and the things that were a little less busy but still prideful.
You might want to not consider that one. Put that at the bottom of the pile, personally. Just kind of keeping in mind, I guess, like, I don't know if it's like modern or anything like that, but I just don't think it's very tasteful.
So what the brand was able to identify through this feedback was there was a demand for more subtle Pride merchandise in this case. They still wanted to show their Pride, but they wanted to do it in a more subtle way rather than having, in this case, rainbows or different symbols all over their merchandise. The other thing is exactly what they were trying to avoid, which was offending the community in any way. So they were able to identify items that did that and either tweak that or remove it from their product line. So we talked a lot about today using Gen Z feedback to concept test marketing, but we can also take a step back and look at how some brands have used Gen Z feedback across the entire marketing lifecycle on our platform. They use it from everything from setting their strategy to Gen Z, to obviously testing it before execution, and then even to measure the effectiveness of their brand campaigns on our platform. So with that, before we wrap up, I just wanted to share a few different takeaways or tips from our team. We've now run hundreds of concept testing studies on our platform, and these are some of the things that we've seen come up and some really easy things to avoid when marketing to Gen Z and setting off their bullshit meter. The first is assuming you have a grasp of the latest Gen Z slang. So you heard this a lot in the first video, but one of the easiest ways to set up their bullshit meter is to use slang that is either outdated or out of context. If you stop by our booth or if you're checking my shirt out right now, it says sheesh on it. This is a nod to this kind of an inside joke for our company of how we've seen brands completely mess this up by just not getting Gen Z feedback. So using Gen Z slang is totally cool. Just make sure to get some feedback from Gen Z to make sure it's being used in the right way or not out of context. The second is letting the media define your definition of Gen Z. So what we mean by this is Gen Z is the most diverse generation alive today. Brands that make broad stroke assumptions about what Gen Z likes based on what they're hearing on the media or based on stereotypes they've heard usually end up setting off Gen Z's bullshit meter. So you saw this with the case study that we saw where that brand thought by tapping into kind of something in pop culture would help their brand, but it had the opposite effect. And there's many different examples of this. Something we're seeing in our research a lot today is Gen Z being that digital first generation. But we're seeing across several different industries that Gen Z actually prefers to do things in person, whether it's shopping or going to a doctor, whatever it might be. So a lot of the times Gen Z is actually bucking this trend and bucking different stereotypes that they've kind of been labeled with. And lastly, it's attaching your brand to causes just for exposure, especially when you do it in inauthentic ways. So it's no surprise and no secret that Gen Z is one of the most socially conscious generation, one of the most socially minded generations. So working with and working in tandem with different nonprofits and social causes is a great way to get in front of Gen Z. Where this can get you in trouble is when you do it in an inauthentic manner. So this always happens around this time of the year where brands, try to activate around Pride Month and oftentimes can do it in a very inauthentic manner. And that's a really easy way to set off their BS meter or even get canceled. So one of the best things and pieces of advice here is when you do partner with different charitable causes or nonprofits, making sure that you're showing up in a way that is very authentic to your brand. And the best way to do that is get feedback from Gen Z on it to make sure that they are seeing it in the same way as you are and have the same point of view. So with that, we'll wrap things up today. Just a quick plug, if you want to stay in touch and keep up to date with our latest Gen Z insights, both in the US and Europe now, feel free to scan this QR code. It'll take you right to our newsletter. We drop something every week. And if this resonated with you at all, if you're a marketer trying to figure out how to reach Gen Z, check out our website. We'd love to chat or stop by our booth. It's the big green one next to the coffee stand. But really appreciate everyone's time here. It's great to be here in London, and thank you all for your time today, this morning.
Thank you so much, Anish. We're actually going to keep you on stage a little longer because I'm sure lots of people have some really burning questions to ask. So we've got a roaming mic. So if you have any questions for Anish, just wave at us wherever you are. Oh, yes. Okay, amazing.
Hiya. So we I get a lot of youth customers, and we find that the best thing to do is just not mention stuff, because if you talk about it, people will call you out. But we want to be more proactive in reaching people, but like you say, it's so diverse, you don't want to single anybody out. I mean, how can a brand convey that without being, really obvious?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's a couple different ways we've seen brands do that really well. The honest truth is, like, if you're creating really good marketing campaigns, you're probably going to maybe offend someone or maybe rub someone the wrong way. I think that's just something that's going to happen. But some ways you can do that is to hone in specifically within Gen Z, specific audiences within Gen Z, and build for them, your most ideal audience, the one you really care about. Or the second one is to get very diverse set of feedback, so talking to a large set of Gen Zers. So something we do a lot of times for our partners is look at large sample sizes, talking to, instead of 50 people, maybe 150, maybe 300, maybe 500, up to 1,000, and making sure it's a very diverse audience. So over indexes on minority populations and other populations that might not have been represented in a smaller sample size. So that's typically how we would approach that. But it is a very fine balance, and that's somewhere where feedback can help, as it allows you to activate in these creative ways without having a fail or getting canceled by Gen Z.
Amazing. Any more questions for Anish at all? No? Okay. Oh, yes. Okay, there we go.
Hi, thank you for that. I just wanted to ask how you recruit your Gen Zers.
Yeah, great question. So we have a variety of different recruitment tools. The first one is actually word of mouth is one of our most popular ways. We incentivize our Gen Z panel through a mix of social donations or charity donations, as well as traditional incentives. So word of mouth, digital marketing, and then we also partner with other third-party communities that we tap into and verify with our technology, and then pull into our panel as well. So it's a mix of those three tactics.
Great. Any last questions before we let Anish go? Amazing. Let's give it up for Anish one more time. Thank you so much.